All right, welcome back to the Chase MedSearch podcast. My guest today is Don Donnelly, a medical device executive with more than 20 years of experience building and leading high-performance commercial organizations in neuromodulation and other innovative medical technologies. Throughout his career, Don has helped launch disruptive therapies, build sales organizations from the ground up, develop physician education programs, and lead teams through every stage of commercialization from startup growth to market expansion. Beyond his professional career, Don is also the author of Navigating PANDAS, A Family's Journey of Healing and Advocacy. This book chronicles his family's deeply personal experience navigating pediatric autoimmune neuropsychiatric disorders associated with streptococcal infections, also known as PANDAS, after his son became ill. What began as a father's search for answers evolved into a mission to raise awareness, educate families and healthcare professionals, and advocate for earlier recognition and treatment. Today's conversation is an opportunity to discuss commercial leadership, innovation in medical technology, patient advocacy, and how personal experiences can shape professional purpose. Don, welcome to the Chase MedSearch podcast.
Thanks for having me, and a special thank you to Chad for making me way cooler than I actually
am. You're very cool, Don, as it is. You didn't need ChatGPT for that. I've worked with you for, golly, I was thinking about this, 10, 15 years or so. I know we've known each other longer than that, but it's always been a great time, and good to see you here via the podcast format. Tell us about your path into medical devices and what has kept you passionate about healthcare for more than 2 decades.
So I've shared this story before, and I love talking about it, but it actually started with an unfortunate incident. My parents were in Kansas City at a restaurant. My mom had a cardiac event and actually collapsed there in the restaurant. My dad doesn't know CPR, so he was just kind of panicking. And luckily, there were 2 paramedics from Alaska, of all places, in Missouri doing some training. And they said, "Sir, can we help out?" They kind of took over. They got her pulse back because her pulse had stopped. And they kept her stable until the ambulance got there. I got the call to rush up to the hospital. I'm there, standing there, holding hands with family, trying to figure out what's going on. And nobody's giving us any answers. And here comes this guy who walks in with his lab coat on. And he says, "Hey, here's the deal. Your mom's going to be great. She's got what's called congestive heart failure. We're going to put something called a cardiac pacemaker in her, and she's going to be good as new." And we're all excited and, jumping up and down. And I went to go shake his hand, and I said, "Thank you, doctor. I appreciate all this." And he said, "Whoa, I'm not a doctor. I work for a company called Medtronic, and we make the device." And I was hooked. At that point, I knew that's what I wanted to do.
Wow, what an amazing personal story. That's a great entrance into the medical device industry and the impact it can have on families. Stellar stuff there. You've worked with startups as well as established organizations. What excites you most about building something from the ground up?
What's cool with startups is it doesn't matter what your background is. It doesn't matter if you're a CEO or the guy that cleans the windows in the front of the building. Everybody's after the same purpose. So when it comes to, hey, I need somebody to fly somewhere, everybody raises their hand. Or, hey, I need somebody, Don, you had some marketing experience when you were at St. Jude. Can you help design this brochure? Yeah, I haven't done it in a while, but you bet. I'll do what I can to help. And I love that feeling. You to a sense, you do that with a big company too, but it kind of gets lost in projections and quarterly conference calls to make sure everybody's doing their job, and that's very important in a big corporation. But when you lose sight of what it took to get there and everybody kind of jumping in and doing what they can to make sure the company succeeds, I love that feeling in a company.
You've crystallized what I tell people all the time is, this is going to take advantage of so many skill sets you have and build so many that you don't even know that you need or
That's
have.
Right.
And that gives people energy or it takes it away from them. But the right ones for startups, it gives them a ton of energy and just a chance to really maximize their potential. It's so much fun. Looking back, what career decisions had the biggest impact on your success?
So I actually said yes a lot. I've got a very supportive wife. We've moved multiple times for promotions. I started off in Kansas City as a rep at ANS before St. Jude bought them, and it was me versus 14 Medtronic reps. I'm just doing what I can just to grab market share from them. And luckily, I was offered a promotion into the marketing department, so I moved the family to Plano. And from there, I learned marketing. I learned about product management, went into sales training. I got to do some international sales training, which was super cool. Then we moved again to Nashville, and that's where I started my management career. Went through a bunch of changes there, ended up moving to Florida, and now my very supportive wife is telling me we'll never move again. But I think if I didn't get that opportunity to move and take some of these promotions, I don't know, I think I'd probably still be a successful rep in Kansas City. But I love that I was able to spread my wings and learn a bunch of other things.
What a fantastic answer. Say yes. Say yes.
Please.
That's
Yeah. If you can, say yes.
yeah. What qualities in your experience separate good sales leaders from truly great commercial leaders?
I think the most important part is you have to listen to your people. Especially in this day and age, people become reactionary so quickly, especially in a smaller company. You have to take the time and really listen to what's going on. Just like in a sales call, you ask questions to find out the need behind the need. That's really no different than the internal customer or the people that are working for you. There's a reason something's slowing down, or there's a reason that something's not getting done. Or you might notice just a person's not the same as they were a month ago. And sometimes it's just getting them outside the office and really listening and supporting and putting together a plan where you guys can figure out as much as you can to help out. If it's a personal issue, just be there to listen. If it's not, and they're just struggling with their work, help them out and get them some help. And I think a lot of the leaders that I've worked for have given me those kinds of opportunities when I've struggled with some stuff.
Yeah, great point. Bring the human element into business. And a lot of times when it's artfully done, it fosters incredible loyalty from what I've seen as well, because you remember that they were there for you when you needed them. You've launched multiple disruptive technologies. What have those experiences taught you about leadership during periods of uncertainty?
You said it right there. It's all uncertainty. Sometimes you're joining a company that's got a cool device, but you have no idea what it's going to do. Does it have proper coding? Is there market access yet? I'll just use Nalu as an example. It was 2020. They're launching in the middle of COVID, which, is just crazy to me that they had such great success with it. But the device was so cool. Mm-hmm. And when you're stepping away from spinal cord stim and realizing that you're treating the peripheral nerves, it's not just being able to help more patients, because there's endless more patients you can do with that. What's cool about it is if you can put a lead near whatever nerve's bothering it, that gives you about 32 to 38 more options of treating somebody else's pain. And so it was cool as we started to peel that back, just to be able to, it's not just about the device at this point. It's okay, how do we treat these different types of pain? And we really helped create all that with our physician partners.
Yeah, that is, that space is so hot right now.
It is.
I think I know I've worked with 3 of the peripheral nerve companies in one form or another. And you see the great exit Nalu had, you see the exit that SBR has had. StimWave is still out there. You've got BioVenus now with StimRouter, and Nirvonics coming on, and they're building a great team too. So exciting space. And you were at the very forefront of that in the day. That's pretty awesome. Let's shift a little bit. You've spent your career helping patients through innovative medical technology. What was it like when your own family suddenly became the patient?
It was different. I thought I was going to have a leg up because I know about prior authorizations. I know how to help patients through the funnel if there's some kind of roadblock. It helped, but it didn't help that much. And, as we go through the story, you'll hear just challenges that we kept running into over the span of 2 years. Mm-hmm. It helped because I was able to reach out to physicians that I've worked with around the world and get their input on what I should do, because we were really lost at one point. But from a standpoint of what do I do, or how are we stuck, or how do we get out of this, I really didn't have that much based on my experience, and I actually had to turn to my spouse for a lot of that.
Yeah. Can you share your family's journey to a PANDAS diagnosis?
Yeah, so let me kind of walk through kind of a layman's PANDAS patient. So when you or I get strep throat, we get this terrible sore throat, we have the flu, we just kind of feel yucky for about a week. And you may or may not get an antibiotic from your doctor, but either way, you're riding that out for probably 7 days. Well, during that 7 days, your white blood cells are being released and they're attacking the bacteria that's in your body. And eventually it's ridding it, through the body, and you're on the mend. And hopefully in about a week, you're ready to go. With PANDAS patients, and these are mostly children, the white blood cells, once they're done fighting the bacteria, they don't disengage. So what they do is they go after the healthy cells of the brain, specifically the basal ganglion, and it causes inflammation, and you literally see a child change overnight. For us, it was right at the start of when things were starting to shut down with COVID. And my 9-year-old son at the time, who was just the happiest go lucky kid, he always had a football or a plastic army gun or something walking around. He never stood still, always smiled ear to ear. Well, he came down with his first sickness, not just strep throat, but it's the first time he'd ever been sick. And what was strange is that hyper kid that, was always on the go was all of a sudden super clingy and super lovey. And it kind of struck him differently. He, of course, was sick and had a fever and all that, but his symptoms were it almost made him like a really lovey child and clingy, which we hadn't seen from him at all. And so, as a parent, we just wanted to comfort him, and we were kind of all around him. But same thing, 5 to 7 days, he was up on the go and picked up his football and started running around the house again. We started to notice changes almost immediately with him. The first changes we noticed were defiance. And he was the rule follower. He was the one that if you said, hey, time to eat or time to do your homework, okay. And he'd run down and do it, and then he'd go back up to doing whatever he was doing. It was met with immediate no's, which is something we hadn't heard. And as a parent, hey, you don't say that, you're going to get grounded or you're going to get chores or something's going to happen, no video games. And so we kept seeing kind of a cycle of that. And the no's were met with louder no's. And over time, defiance turned to anger, and anger turned to violence. And this was a 9-year-old kid. And over the span of those 2 years, it went from, hey, I got the opportunity to launch this new commercial organization and PNS, to I'm afraid to leave home to travel now, to leave this 9-year-old kid alone with my wife. And it was everything from, curse words that I didn't even know he knew, to kicking cabinets when he was told no, to throwing things, definitely a lot of punching. He just was a different kid. And although we had started to see specialists pretty early on to try to identify it, it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. So it ended up taking 2 years and 13 different specialists before we finally got the correct diagnosis. But the story that's behind it is the person that found the correct diagnosis was my wife. So every one of my physicians that I've talked to in the days, they don't like Google parents. Nobody does.
Right.
Had we not have had a Google parent in this case, which was my wife, who was just brilliant and dived into this just completely with her whole body and even her own mental health, just to really fight to find out what was wrong. She found this out by going to support groups and getting on autism websites and talking to functional doctors, not just pediatrician, but functional doctors that look for root causes of stuff. And she finally went to the doctor after his second hospitalization and said, hey, have you ever looked at PANDAS for this? And the doctor kind of stopped, and almost like he said some kind of magic word. And everybody knows what PANDAS is, but they don't talk about it. And it's weird. I don't know if you know the movie, it's called Saving Maya. And it's about a little girl that was sick and she had these weird symptoms. And her mom did the same thing, just kind of dived in and she took control. And the state ended up separating the mother from the child because they thought that she was doing Munchausen's and making up all these sicknesses and all this stuff. We went to that same hospital, and anybody that's seen the story knows that but that's the closest children's hospital
Wow.
that we're closest to. And, we kind of had that feeling. Number one, why are you bringing a kid to a hospital during COVID? Number two, um, we don't see anything wrong. This is a psych issue. It wasn't a psych issue. And it took that long to kind of figure it out. And once we finally got the diagnosis and the support we needed, we were able to treat it. He's going to be a junior in high school right now. He's super smart. He's funny. He doesn't remember a lot of what happened at 9 through 11, but he's just a great kid. And this diagnosis is what was needed.
Thank
And
God.
so the reason we started to become advocates for it is because we're starting to realize just how common this is. And it's either being misdiagnosed as a psych issue, or in some cases, they recommend inpatient care. And we wanted nothing to do with that. So we were willing to live with it till we figured out what was wrong.
It kind of reminds me of something we went through with one of our own children around a potential diagnosis for Kawasaki's disease, where there isn't an actual blood test for that. There isn't anything biological that you can prove and definitively say. They kind of have to piece together evidence of other issues that the child has and that they're going through and experiencing to kind of come up with that diagnosis. Is PANDAS similar to that, or is there any kind of genetic marker, biological marker, blood test, or anything that can be done to identify it and diagnose it that way?
So it's weird because it's so common now and because there's so many advocates. Now they're coming out with things where there's still not a blood test or something you can definitively say this is what it is. But what we're finding out is PANDAS is actually under an umbrella of what's called PANS, Pediatric Autoimmune Neuropsychiatric Syndrome. And in our case, it's strep throat that caused it, but it might be Lyme disease. It might be something called Bartonella. It might be mold. We're finding out mold, if you move into a house where there's mold maybe trapped underneath a wall, and all of a sudden the kids start having these same type of symptoms. So it's kind of all under this encompassing umbrella of PANS. And yes, so now there's starting to be treatment for it. There's advocacy groups. There's a support group called PANDAS Parents that my wife found, but they have no idea how they kind of helped us as a family. And it's just a Facebook group, and you start to read these stories, and I'm like, that's our kid. That is our kid. And that's where my wife really kind of learned, okay, well, who do we go see then? What did you do when you had success seeing that? And so we're still on there every night. We'll go on there for about an hour and we'll see somebody else that's struggling. And number one, it brings us right back to where we were. So the PTSD is very real with this. But more importantly, we want to give back. We want to help and share our experience. And that's what kind of led to the book.
Was there a defining moment when everything finally made sense? Like it was sort of crystal clear, hey, this is PANDAS.
So because I have the medical background, I probably discounted a lot of the stuff my wife was saying at first, because let's just face it, she was just maniacal about figuring out what was wrong. And I'm like, okay, Stephanie, come on, let's let the professionals do their job, because that's what I was taught in this industry. It was her introducing us to this group where we found out there were more stories, where that's where I realized, you're right, you're absolutely right. Now, how do we convince the doctors to agree that? And so we would come up with a plan. And during one of these hospitalizations, when she was getting scolded for trying to tell the doctor what to do and told to stay in her lane, I've never seen psycho come out of somebody as fast as she did, but she did it in a professional way. And she said, look, here's what the research is. At least look at it, because you got nothing outside of this. And I'm not going to inpatient my child if you're not going to give me a reason why it's happening. And they listened. And there was a treatment called IVIG. It's incredibly expensive. They even said, we don't think your insurance is going to cover it, but I think we should give it a try. And they shoot, essentially, they shoot healthy plasma from donors, and it's over a 7-day course of fluids. And you get bad headaches, but essentially, it's doing a Control-Alt-Delete on his immune system. And all
Wow.
of the symptoms that he had, all of them were gone within 3 days.
Mm, 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 mm.
So now we're fortunate enough to have an insurance that covers that. There's still challenges that we have to go, but it's nothing like what we used to do.
Mhm.
And his memory is good, everything's great. But I can tell you, IVIG is not a magical cure for everybody. If you follow some of the patients, there's a group called Justice for Gianna. That's somebody I started following. He's actually going a step further, and he's filming some of the flares, putting it on social media, and he's tagging Robert Kennedy, he's tagging Health and Human Services, he's tagging anybody he can in government to help with this, because this affects 1 in 200 kids, whether mild or moderate. And it's time that it's not a secret anymore because everybody knows about it. Now we have to start treating it as such.
Going through this journey, how did that change your perspective on physicians, healthcare, patient advocacy? I would imagine as an industry person, like you said earlier, you're taught, let the professionals do their job, help them out where you can, right, in a procedure or something like that. But overall, they're the ones in charge of this.
So they are in charge of it. But I would argue that the patient should be in charge of it. The doctor is the one that's going to give the diagnosis and treat and do all that. But one of the reasons I've stayed in neuromodulation as long as I have is because I see what it can do to these patients. I've seen farm workers in the middle of Kansas that have struggled with a back pain, and that's their livelihood. If they don't work, they don't eat. And they come in and they get a stimulator. And, in some cases, it might have taken them a year to get to that point where they can finally get a trial. So I've always advocated for the pain patient, and that's why I've been in this industry.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I'll probably continue, because you get to see the end result of what's fixing. But it's definitely changed how much more I push for the patient. So in some cases, if the doctor said, well, we've tried everything, I'm going to send him for a surgery. Well, hang on, let's talk about a couple options. Let's at least do a trial,
Yeah.
right? If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. At first, it's the doctor saying, oh, that rep just wants to make more money. But to me, it's let's try it, because you never know if it's going to work or not.
Right. Right. Any other surprises throughout this journey? Maybe what surprised you the most?
What was really cool is, I've got a lot of physician friends around the world. I'm not supposed to call them friends; they're customers, but I've known them for 2 decades.
Yeah.
The ones that really reached out and said, hey, I saw this post that your wife made, or I see you're going through some stuff, or hey, I just heard you're going through some stuff. And they want to introduce me to the chief of pediatrics at Emory. They want to introduce me to somebody at Berkeley that actually studies something similar to that, which ended up being PANDAS. There was a physician in Atlanta that said, my brother does, he's a genetic professor in Texas, and he can help you out. And it's amazing who came out and truly showed that we're one big community. And that was really cool.
Yeah. It's a great industry to be part of. And I'm so involved on the business end of it, I think a lot of us are, that you can kind of forget the amazing aspect of people's nature that are in it. And then every now and then something will happen that'll remind me all over again just how awesome so many people are in this, and how caring, how compassionate, how willing to help people can be. It's special. And I'm glad you got to experience that in the middle of such a tough situation. What inspired you to write Navigating PANDAS, a family's journey of healing and advocacy?
So it's mostly because nobody knows what PANDAS is. And that's no different than, my dad, when he was alive, I think it took 10 years for him to understand what I did for a living. So neuromodulation was the same way. People would be like, all right, college boy, you don't have to show your big words on me. But to this day, not very many people have heard of neuromodulation. I've got a neighbor that's had, multiple back surgeries that probably could have benefited from it. PANDAS shouldn't have to be that way. And I don't know if it's because it's kids that it mostly affects that I'm so passionate about it. But me and my wife both want to get the word out as much as we can. And I think in high school, I was voted least likely to read a book. So writing one was hard for me, but it just came out. And I want to be able to have people read this story and just like I did say, that's our son, there's hope, there's help, and here's what we can do to do it. And it doesn't just point out our experiences, it points out the different types of physicians that treat it. It talks about, support groups like we found and all these other groups. And honestly, I've gotten so much out of just writing it that the people that we're helping with the messages that I'm getting back, and I've got a website and people reach out to me on social media where they're like, thank you so much. And I don't know what I did, but it helped.
Yeah. Is that who you wrote the book for, the parents? Or was there another audience you had in mind as well?
It was a little bit therapeutic for me. I'm not the kind of guy that shows a lot of emotion. I'm trying to commercialize a company at the same time all this stuff was going on. So I really didn't get a lot of opportunity to deal with it myself. So some of it was therapeutic for me to kind of get that out on paper. And then the other part is, man, there's so many people out there. There might be kids in institutions right now that have an autoimmune disease, but they're being treated for psychiatric symptoms. And we got to get those kids and we got to get them help.
If every pediatrician read one chapter, what would you hope they learned?
Not to be afraid to push the boundaries. I think a lot of pediatricians, since they're the first line, and this is really kind of American medicine as a whole, is you're sent to that first place to go, and then they triage if you need to go to a specialist or not. And then when you're at that first line, insurance kind of dictates what you do. Hey, let's get these blood tests. Hey, let's do this. And then when you can't find anything, you send them to a specialist. I think we need to educate the first line much better on identifying symptoms. For example, if somebody has strep throat and they change overnight, it shouldn't take 2 years to find that. They should know within the next couple of weeks. And I can't tell you that it's going to make it faster or make it go away better. They're going to be a cure faster. But at least knowing that that's what the diagnosis can be, you can start treatment and start at least going down that path.
That's great. What misconceptions about PANDAS? I mean, I think you kind of touched on some of them. Do you want to change the most?
So it's not a psychiatric issue. Granted, they're showing psychiatric symptoms, but it's an autoimmune issue. And if you could find out what the trigger is, whether it is strep throat or whether it's mold or whatever, then you could find a way to perhaps make it stop or go away. Mold, I didn't realize is such a big issue. I mean, I can remember my college bathroom, it had mold everywhere. Right? And as gross as that is, it is, but I didn't have any symptoms.
Right.
But you're reading these stories where somebody moves into a house and the same symptoms happen, and then they're just kind of discounted by their doctor. That first line doctor should say, did you just move? Is there mold in your house? Have you checked if there's mold in your house? Have they had strep throat recently? And just asking those simple, basic questions could take you down a different path.
This experience has to have had many effects on you, but, I would guess, how has it changed you as a leader, how you coach, mentor, develop people? Do you notice effects in that way?
I do. 2020, everybody was kind of going through their own stuff. But I could tell you my first group of people that I hired at NALU, 3 of them were going through, one had cancer in the family, one had a brother that had passed away, and everybody was kind of going through all this stuff at the same time. But it was also a very shaky time because you're with a new company, you're just getting financing down, it's COVID, nobody wants to lose their jobs. Mm-hmm. So people were kind of afraid to speak up about anything. We didn't do that. I found as a leader, let's kind of address these things, whether it's one-on-one or as a group. And what we found was, yes, there's a bond, but that it's okay to talk. And if you're not comfortable talking in a group and you feel comfortable talking to your boss about it, call me up. And the leaders that I had, Alan Meacham, I didn't tell a lot of my coworkers. Mm-hmm. And once I had to tell them, I reached out to Alan Meacham first, who was my boss at Nalu. And wow, man, super supportive.
Great
Do
guy.
what you have to do. Your family should come first. Your
Mhm.
job's going to be here. And whatever I can do, even if it's just a sounding board, let me know. So he helped out a lot. But even our HR at Nalu, everybody really kind of
Mhm.
jumped in. It goes back to the small company feel, right? They don't just punt it to HR and then you deal with that. You have real people that are helping you out and want to be a part of helping you.
Yeah, I want to shout out Bick Sellers on this as well, who is just a tremendous HR person, HR partner, and leader. I really enjoyed working with her.
Vic and Jess, who was in charge of insurance, because small companies you change insurance like every hour to save money,
Yeah.
and every time you do that, you have to go through prior authorizations again and all that stuff.
Mhm.
They would call me before we're about to change insurance just so we can get a head start. So I agree with you; they were both very instrumental in helping out.
That's great. You often say sometimes behavior is biology. What do you mean by that?
So we'll probably talk about him later, but I do have a mentor in this business. His name's Dan Freilich.
Hmm.
Um, I don't even remember the backstory, but I use it all the time. And it had something to do with his football coach. And he was, working really hard to get something done, and he just wasn't getting it accomplished. And I'm going to use my Texas accent here, but he said his football coach would, hey, you need a checkup from the neck up. And, there's different ways of looking at that, but sometimes you realize that if you're just kind of staring back and realizing you might be working really hard at a goal or working really hard at trying to get something accomplished. But if things aren't going right up here, sometimes you need to take a step back, and it could be your biology. It could be that you're having a bad day. It could be a bunch of things. But sometimes it's just taking a step back and realizing, stop for a second, kind of reload, and then go back and try to figure out what you're accomplishing. And I use checkup from the neck up all the time now.
It's a great catchphrase, and
Yeah.
it communicates a world of insight there. um, what advice would you give someone facing a challenge with no clear answers?
It's difficult. It's really difficult because it might be that they feel like they can't talk, or there might be risk if they talk. Um, like in this case, when I was considering writing the book, he was 10 at the time when I was started writing it. But people were asking, family members were saying, well, what's going to happen when he's older? His name's going to be out there. Is this going to hurt, jobs down the road? We got to start talking about stuff like this, whether it's PANDAS or whatever. If you don't talk, nothing's going to get accomplished.
Mhm.
And, I think talking in our case has helped other parents that are going through it. But this goes along everything. It's like we're talking about somebody having a death in the family, or somebody needing to take time away from work on FMLA because they have a family situation. Talk about it, because it's going to eat you up if you don't. But more importantly, you might be able to help somebody else that's going through the same thing.
Throughout your career, and I know you've worked with some great leaders, who are some of the ones you've admired the most and why?
Man, this is a long list. So Paul Hanchin was my first salesperson. Paul is quietly intense, super smart, and the hardest interview to this day I've ever been through. He doesn't give you anything, and he'll deny it. He says he's not like that if you talk to him right now. It was a hard interview. And even when I went through promotions, he was always the one that I was sweating to go in and see. Um, he taught me that you can be quietly confident. He's taught me never let him see you sweat, as it relates to customers, as it relates to the reps that are under you. And he said, you don't always have to talk. It's very important that you're just kind of listening. So I still go to him for mentorship. I talk to Ron Kuykendall a lot.
Mm.
We talked about Alan Meacham. I still talk to him. Um, there's so many good leaders. Dan Freilich, I talked about him.
Mhm.
Dan was my Franklin Covey trainer at Tyco Healthcare, my first medical sales job. And Dan wanted to be a trainer because he didn't like public speaking. And so he's teaching this first class. He ends up being my sales trainer at Tyco. So I have him for two different 2-week classes down the road. Fast forward, I go watch a spinal cord stem case because I'm early for my Smith and Nephew case. Ron Kuykendall, who I mentioned earlier on, who's still one of my guys that I reach out to for help. He's finishing up his last case and then he's getting promoted into the home office. Ron said, hey, you ought to interview for this. There's a guy named Dan Freilich that's in town interviewing. So oddly enough, my Franklin Covey trainer is now working for ANS and he's interviewing. So Dan and I have worked together at New Vectra. We had some great times and some bad times there. And then Dan and I are constantly figuring out how we're going to work together again. But I turn to him a lot. I probably turn to him a lot more than he turns to me. But just a super wise and knowing, non-judgmental, and just a great guy.
If you could spend an hour with any healthcare or medical technology leader, past or present, who would it be and why?
I would love to get in the head of a bunch of people, but Al Mann probably did a lot for the industry. He launched Advanced Bionics, and he started the Boston Scientific spinal cord stem system. When they launched, they were just miles ahead of everybody else. But it turns out he's working on all kinds of other things, and he was way ahead of his time. Right? He was almost kind of he hired the best engineers, and he developed things that the market needed, not that the company wanted to just sell. And man, he did a really good job by hiring the best because all the products that he put out were incredible. Now, the Al Mann Group still is around. They've still got devices. I think they have a tinnitus device still and some other stuff. But that was impressive. But honestly, there's a lot of great engineers that have developed systems that, honestly, if I go have a conversation with them, I leave and I realize that I just didn't study very hard in school. But they're all about trying to find cures to stuff. And I've worked with a lot of those great guys and gals.
Is there any characteristic that the great leaders that you've worked with in the past all seem to have in common?
Every one of them was so different. I think the common thing is everybody reached for the same goal. So a lot of times sales and marketing in small organizations don't get along at all.
Right.
But when they do get along, it's because, hey, we have to reach this goal and we have to do it. But, it's funny. One leader would say, hey, Don, you don't have to be the funny guy all the time. And then the next leader would say, hey, where's the funny guy? Right? That's the guy we brought in. So, everybody's different in what they taught me. But I can tell you it's every one of them I took some nugget away from that made me a better person.
Great. Are there any emerging leaders or companies in MedTech that you always, are particularly excited to watch, or people you track and you say, wonder what they're doing next?
I'm super excited about Neuromod right now.
Yeah.
I remember when physicians would come into the home office in Plano when I worked for St. Jude, we had this futuristic slide that showed indications that were years down the path, right? And there must have been probably 40 targets on there pointing to anatomical structure in the body, like deep brain and tinnitus and peripheral nerve and all these different indications. Those are here now. There's companies that are actively launched that are selling all these things that were futuristic back then. So, I'm really excited what Nick Soa is doing in the ENT space. They have a guy named Scott Holstein over there that's the chief commercial officer. I worked with Scott at New Vectra and at Flowonics. I know what he's capable of. He's super smart. He's driven. So I'm super excited about what they have. We talked about Nirvonic a little bit. They have a pretty slick PNS device that they're working on, and they're making some other changes that are happening right now. But man, cool stuff with that technology. I don't know what's going on with wearables right now, but there's some cool wearables that are on the market now. There's a restless leg device company that's out there, a lot of migraine stuff. There's external vagal nerve stimulators now that we're kind of looking at. They need reimbursement, all that other stuff, but I'm excited about the externals market as well. So lots of really good stuff. I think if I was going to look at any of those leaders, I'd keep looking at seeing what Scott's doing. Dan's got some good stuff that's going on over there. So keep an eye on those guys.
Great. That is one of the most common questions I get. So I appreciate you taking a stab at it and some really great information there. If you were beginning your career today, where would you focus your attention? So
I think I'd stick with chronic pain. it really makes a difference when you see changing somebody's life. And even at a high level, as a VP or whatever position you're holding, you're not that far removed in spinal cord stimulation where you're helping chronic pain patients or you hear some kind of great story. I don't know how, but those first 2 years that I moved to different promotions, somehow I would always get a Christmas card from a patient in Kansas City that found me. Now, most people would be a little concerned and shocked that somebody's stalking you to where they know where you're moving, but I didn't care. It's cool that you're a part of somebody's family like that. And that kind of goes back to that story of the Medtronic rep. I felt that way about the Medtronic rep so much that I wanted to get into the industry.
What do you think, looking back on your career, and obviously you've got a lot more to go, but what separates people who build long, successful careers in this industry in medical devices from those who don't?
So great question. I think the biggest part is number one, you have to have a great sense of integrity. There's no shortcuts in this industry. So people that take shortcuts, they just burn out. Having 3 jobs on the side, picking a device where you're just in it for the guarantee, and then you jump to the next company so you can get the guarantee. It stops after that second or third one anyway. So I think a lot of those days are over. But honestly, just do what you do really well and stick to it. Grow a company. Put that on your wall of success that you helped commercialize a company that got sold, and more importantly, is now available to 1 million more patients that are suffering. That's a cool feeling to have. And luckily, I've got a couple of those notches on the belt.
Yeah, that's great. I know you do. Beyond business success, what impact do you hope to have on the people you've led?
Honestly, just make me proud. I've got some great people that I've led, and I can't single out very many people. I will single out one. I'll just say Erin. She came in with no neuromodulation experience, ended up being a manager. Now she's a senior manager over at another company doing extremely well. She was one of those people that she didn't wait for training to train her. She trained herself.
Mm.
She didn't wait to go see cases or be invited to cases. She invited herself. Impeccable note taker,
Yep.
fantastic leader. And I get way more joy out of seeing one of my people succeed like that, get on the stage multiple times, get a promotion into management. Way more excitement goes on inside of me than me getting my own trophy.
Yeah, that's fantastic. She is all of that and even more, just an absolute performer, stellar person. Looking ahead, what chapter of your story are you most excited to write next?
Well, hopefully it's a book and not a chapter. I got a long way to go, but there's some exciting companies out there, and I'd love to be a part of it. The important thing is I want to continue to help people. And if there are people that are struggling, we got to figure out better ways, better access to pain management doctors, better access to not necessarily sending somebody to a surgery just because they have back pain. We got to do better at that. And I'll do my part. I'll do what I can on that level, but we have to continue to educate these physicians. For the most part, they want to work with industry just as much as we want to work with them. And there's a lot of great doctors out there and doctors that I've worked with. We just have to keep everybody learning from each other so we can get access to these patients.
Great. Well, maybe one last question here, Don. You've been generous with your time. If listeners remember only one thing from today's conversation, what do you hope it is?
I hope people understand that when I say I care about the patients, I really do. And whether it's my own family or my reps' families or anybody that I've worked with's families or the ones that we treat every day with neuromodulation, we're making a difference by helping all of these people. And just remember, whether it's a big company or a small company, somebody's going through something. It's okay to take them out to lunch and be that leader that they need. It's not just about hitting your numbers. Sometimes it's about just being a part of something bigger than that. And if you do that, you're going to find yourself having a very successful career.
Wise words. Don, thanks for being on. Really appreciate it. This is good stuff.
Thank you, Jordan.
Yeah, absolutely.